My boss stole my software to sell for millions, but he didn't know I left a trap. It all started on a rainy Tuesday morning when the world seemed to be conspiring against me. I had been working at Technova Solutions for 3 years, pouring my heart and soul into developing what I truly believed was going to be revolutionary software. It wasn't just another app or a flashy tool, it was something that could change how small businesses managed their operations. I called it Flowsync. It simplified inventory management, payroll, customer relations, and analytics into one seamless platform. The idea came to me late one night after seeing my cousin struggle with juggling spreadsheets for her bakery. She didn't have time or money to invest in expensive enterprise solutions, so I thought, why not build something accessible? Something intuitive. The project began as a passion of mine, something I worked on during weekends and evenings. But once I mentioned it to my boss, Richard, he lit up like a Christmas tree. He said it aligned perfectly with the company's goals, promising me full support from the development team if I wanted to bring it under Technova's umbrella. At first, I hesitated. This was my baby after all, but Richard assured me we'd split profits fairly and give me creative control. His words made sense then. Think about the resources you'll have here. We can take your vision global. So I agreed. Flowsync became an official Technova project, and suddenly, I found myself leading meetings, presenting prototypes, and working closely with engineers who were supposed to help refine my brainchild. It felt surreal but exciting. My colleagues admired the work I put into it, and even Richard complimented me regularly on its potential. For months, everything seemed perfect, or at least as close to perfect as things could get in corporate life. But perfection is fragile, especially when greed gets involved. Richard wasn't always bad, at least, not openly. When I first joined Technova, he struck me as ambitious yet fair, someone who pushed his employees because he believed they could achieve greatness. Over time, though, cracks began to show. He'd often claim credit for ideas pitched by junior staff members, subtly rewriting narratives until everyone forgot whose concept it really was. Still, I never imagined he'd turn those tactics on me, not over something this big. The signs started creeping in gradually. First, there were the closed-door meetings between Richard and some of the senior executives. Whenever I asked about them, he brushed it off with vague answers like, just strategizing, or nothing you need to worry about right now. Then came the budget cuts to our department. Resources dwindled, deadlines tightened, and suddenly, I was being pressured to hand over more documentation than usual. Every line of code, every design mock-up, I had to log it meticulously into shared drives, supposedly for transparency purposes. At first, I chalked it up to standard corporate paranoia. Maybe investors were asking questions, or perhaps Richard genuinely wanted to keep tabs on progress. But deep down, unease gnawed at me. Why did he insist on reviewing drafts of user manuals himself instead of delegating? Why did he seem unusually interested in patent filings? And why, out of nowhere, did he start micromanaging every single detail of Flowsync? Then came the day that shattered any lingering trust one might have had in him. I arrived at the office early, clutching 2 cups of coffee, one for me and one for Sarah, my closest coworker. As I walked past Richard's office, I noticed the door slightly ajar. Normally, he kept it shut tight, guarding whatever secrets lay within. Curiosity got the better of me, and I peeked inside. On his desk sat stacks of papers labeled Flowsync Acquisition Proposal and Investor Pitch Deck. My stomach dropped. Acquisition? By whom? And why hadn't anyone told me? Before I could process what I'd seen, Richard appeared behind me, startling me so badly I nearly spilled both coffees. "What are you doing here?" he snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. Nothing," I stammered, stepping back. "Just grabbing something from the printer." His eyes narrowed, scanning me like he was trying to gauge whether I'd discovered too much. After a tense moment, he forced a smile, a fake brittle thing, and said, "Good. Keep focusing on your work. Big things are coming soon." Big things indeed. Later that afternoon, Sarah pulled me aside during lunch break. Her face was pale, her hands trembling as she handed me a printed email she'd accidentally received while troubleshooting the company server. It was addressed to Richard from a venture capital firm called Apex Ventures. They offered $12 million upfront for exclusive rights to Flowsync, contingent upon Technova severing ties with its current lead developer me. The room spun. This couldn't be real. Could it? That evening, I went home and pored over every document related to Flowsync. Contracts, agreements, intellectual property clauses, you name it, I read it. Everything pointed to one horrifying conclusion: Richard intended to sell my software without giving me a penny, or even acknowledgement for my efforts. Worse still, buried in fine print was a clause stating that any product developed using company resources belonged solely to Technova. Legally speaking, he could do exactly what he planned. Panic set in. What options did I have? Quitting meant walking away empty-handed, letting him profit off years of my hard work. Staying meant enduring humiliation while watching him twist my creation into something unrecognizable. Neither path felt acceptable. And then it hit me, an idea born out of desperation and anger. If Richard thought he could steal Flowsync without consequences, he was dead wrong. There was still one card left to play, one fail-safe measure I'd secretly embedded into the system long before suspicions arose. A trap designed to protect my work should anyone ever try to misuse it. A few weeks earlier, while finalizing Flowsync security protocols, I added a hidden feature disguised as routine maintenance code. To anyone else, it looked like harmless debugging logic. In reality, it granted me remote access to the entire system, allowing me to monitor activity, lock users out, or even wipe data clean with a single command. At the time, I justified it as a safeguard against hackers. Now, it served a different purpose entirely. By Friday morning, rumors swirled through the office like wildfire. People whispered about layoffs, restructuring, and mysterious negotiations happening behind closed doors. Richard summoned me to his office shortly after lunch, his expression unreadable. "Take a seat," he said, gesturing toward the leather chair across from his desk. His tone was eerily calm, almost rehearsed. For a brief second, I considered denying everything, playing dumb, acting oblivious to his schemes. But something inside me rebelled against the notion. No, I decided. Let him see me coming. Let him know exactly who he was dealing with. "I assume you've heard the news," he began, leaning forward slightly. His fingers drummed against the polished wood of his desk, betraying nerves beneath his composed facade. "Apex Ventures has shown incredible interest in Flowsync. Their offer is unprecedented, a game-changer for Technova." I nodded slowly, meeting his gaze head-on. "Yes, I've heard." He paused, studying me intently. "You understand what this means, don't you? With their backing, we can scale Flowsync globally. Imagine the impact, the reach, we'll have." "Oh, I imagine it quite clearly," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "But tell me, Richard, where does that leave me in all this?" His lips pressed into a thin line, and for a fleeting moment, guilt flickered across his face. But it vanished just as quickly, replaced by cold pragmatism. Unfortunately, these kinds of deals require sacrifices. Investors want complete control, which means streamlining leadership roles. You've done fantastic work, but moving forward, we'll need someone more aligned with their vision. Translation: you're expendable. My jaw tightened, but I refused to let emotion get the better of me, not yet. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms casually. Interesting choice of words. Sacrifices. So what happens next? Do I pack my things today, or do I stick around long enough to watch you sign away my future? His eyes narrowed, suspicion creeping into his demeanor. "Are you threatening me?" "No," I said softly, a faint smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. "I'm simply pointing out facts. Facts you seem determined to ignore." Silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Finally, Richard exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "Look, I don't want this to turn ugly. You've contributed significantly to Flowsync, and I appreciate that. But business is business. If you cooperate, I'll make sure you walk away with a generous severance package. Refuse," and he trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. "And what?" I prompted, raising an eyebrow. "You'll fire me anyway? Blacklist me? Destroy my reputation?" "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he muttered, frustration edging into his voice. "Don't force my hand." "Too late for that," I shot back, standing abruptly. "You already did." Without waiting for a response, I turned and strode out of his office, leaving him sitting there, stunned and seething. The weight of what I'd just done settled over me like a thick fog, but there was no turning back now. The trap was set. All that remained was to wait and see how far Richard would go before realizing he'd underestimated me. Over the next few days, tension crackled through the office like static electricity. Whispers followed me wherever I went, co-workers exchanging nervous glances whenever I passed by. Some pitied me, others avoided me altogether, afraid of getting caught in the crossfire. Even Sarah, who had been my rock through all of this, seemed hesitant to engage too deeply, her loyalty torn between friendship and self-preservation. Meanwhile, Richard played his part masterfully, orchestrating a narrative designed to paint me as difficult and uncooperative. During team meetings, he praised Flowsync's potential while subtly undermining my contributions, crediting other developers for features I'd painstakingly crafted. Behind closed doors, he ramped up pressure on the legal team to expedite patent filings, ensuring every last scrap of intellectual property tied to the project bore Technova's name. It was a calculated campaign meant to isolate me further, to strip away any remaining allies or leverage I might possess. But I refused to crumble under the weight of his machinations. Instead, I doubled down on my resolve, channeling my anger into action. Each night, after leaving the office, I retreated to my apartment and logged into Flowsync remotely. Through the hidden backdoor I'd embedded, I monitored activity within the system, tracking every keystroke, every modification, every attempt to tamper with the code. I documented everything meticulously, creating a digital paper trail that would expose Richard's betrayal in excruciating detail. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. Here I was, using the very safeguards I'd implemented to protect Flowsync from external threats against the man who now sought to exploit it. It felt surreal, almost poetic, like watching a carefully constructed puzzle fall into place. Yet, despite the satisfaction of knowing I held the upper hand, doubt lingered at the edges of my mind. Was I being reckless? Overconfident? What if Richard somehow uncovered my secret before I could execute my plan? To counterbalance my growing anxiety, I focused on strengthening my position outside the office. I reached out to old contacts in the tech industry, discreetly floating the idea of partnering on future projects once Flowsync inevitably imploded under Richard's mismanagement. I updated my resume, highlighting skills and accomplishments unrelated to Technova, preparing for the possibility of starting fresh elsewhere. Most importantly, I kept a low profile online, avoiding social media and public forums where Richard might catch wind of my intentions. Still, the waiting game wore on me. Every email notification, every phone call, sent my heart racing, convinced it signaled the moment Richard would strike. Part of me wished he'd hurry up and pull the trigger, get it over with so I could unleash the trap I'd laid. Another part dreaded the fallout, knowing it would irrevocably alter not only my career but also the lives of those around me. Then, late one Thursday evening, the inevitable happened. I was hunched over my laptop, sifting through logs from Flowsync's backend when an alert popped up on my screen. Someone, presumably Richard, had initiated a mass data transfer, attempting to export critical components of the software to an external server. My pulse quickened as I watched the process unfold in real time, each byte of information inching closer to escaping my grasp. This was it. The moment I'd prepared for. With trembling fingers, I activated the first phase of my contingency plan. Using the remote access feature I'd built into Flowsync, I locked Richard's account, cutting off his ability to interact with the system entirely. Simultaneously, I triggered a series of automated emails containing incriminating evidence, logs, timestamps, screenshots, all neatly packaged and addressed to key figures within Technova, including members of the board of directors. If Richard thought he could operate unchecked, he was about to discover just how wrong he was. Satisfied with my initial moves, I leaned back in my chair, exhaling shakily. Phase 1 was complete, but the real challenge lay ahead. Tomorrow morning, when Richard realized his plans had unraveled, chaos would erupt. Accusations would fly, alliances would shift, and the delicate facade he'd maintained for so long would crumble beneath the weight of truth. As dawn broke over the city skyline, I braced myself for the storm to come. The next morning unfolded like a scene from a thriller movie, except this wasn't fiction, it was my reality. By the time I stepped into the office, whispers had already turned into murmurs, spreading faster than wildfire. Colleagues exchanged uneasy glances, their expressions ranging from shock to disbelief. Some clung to fragments of conversations they'd overheard, piecing together bits of information while speculation ran rampant. The air buzzed with anticipation, a palpable energy that hinted at impending upheaval. Richard's reaction was immediate and explosive. Within minutes of arriving, he stormed out of his office, his face flushed with rage. "What the hell is going on?" he barked, addressing no one in particular yet drawing everyone's attention. His voice carried an edge of panic, cracking slightly as he demanded answers. "Who leaked confidential company documents?" People froze, unsure whether to speak or remain silent. A few cautiously shuffled papers on their desks, feigning productivity, while others simply stared at him, wide-eyed. It was clear that whatever he'd expected to find waiting for him that morning, this wasn't it. The board of directors had convened an emergency meeting overnight, spurred by the evidence I'd sent directly to their inboxes. Emails detailing unauthorized data transfers, time-stamped records of suspicious activity, and damning screenshots painted a vivid picture of betrayal, not by me but by him. Sarah approached me tentatively, her brow furrowed with concern. "Did you do something?" she asked quietly, keeping her voice low enough to avoid attracting unwanted attention. Her tone wasn't accusatory, merely curious, tinged with a mix of awe and apprehension. I met her gaze steadily, offering a faint smile. Let's just say Richard underestimated who he was dealing with. Her eyes widened momentarily before narrowing in understanding. "You didn't." "Oh, I did," I confirmed, my voice firm despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "And trust me, it's only the beginning." Moments later, the intercom crackled to life, summoning all senior staff to the conference room. Richard reluctantly followed, his shoulders stiff with barely contained fury. As the doors closed behind them, sealing off the rest of us from the unfolding drama, the office erupted into hushed chatter. Phones buzzed incessantly as employees texted friends, family, and former colleagues, sharing snippets of the scandal. Social media platforms lit up with cryptic posts hinting at turmoil within Technova, fueling public curiosity and speculation. Back in my cubicle, I opened my laptop and accessed Flowsync remotely once again. While Richard scrambled to defend himself upstairs, I executed the second phase of my plan. Using the same hidden feature that had allowed me to lock him out, I deployed a series of subtle disruptions throughout the system. These weren't catastrophic failures, they were calculated annoyances designed to erode confidence in Flowsync stability. Error messages popped up intermittently, files failed to save properly, and certain functions slowed to a crawl. To anyone unfamiliar with the software's inner workings, it would appear as though Flowsync itself was falling apart. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Just as the board hammered Richard with questions, reports trickled in from various departments about technical issues plaguing the platform. Engineers scrambled to diagnose problems, only to find themselves stymied by phantom glitches that disappeared as suddenly as they appeared. Frustration mounted, adding another layer of chaos to an already volatile situation. Upstairs, the emergency meeting devolved into shouting matches and accusations. Through the thin walls of the conference room, muffled voices carried snippets of heated exchanges. One director accused Richard of gross misconduct, citing the leaked documents as proof of his duplicity. Another demanded answers about the sudden technical malfunctions, questioning whether sabotage might be involved. Richard, cornered and desperate, lashed out, deflecting blame onto anyone within reach, including me. "She's behind this," he roared, his voice rising above the din. "She hacked the system. She planted false evidence." The accusation hung in the air like smoke, thick and acrid. For a brief moment, silence fell over the room as everyone processed his words. Then, slowly, methodically, the pieces began falling into place. Doubts surfaced, skepticism grew, and the tide of opinion shifted ever so slightly. After all, why would I risk exposing myself unless I had undeniable proof? And if Richard truly believed I was capable of such subterfuge, why hadn't he anticipated it sooner? Downstairs, I monitored the chaos unfolding in real time. Every keystroke, every panicked email, every frantic attempt to salvage the situation fed into my growing sense of vindication. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. Justice for the countless hours I'd poured into Flowsync, for the dreams I'd dared to chase, and for the integrity I refused to surrender. As the day wore on, the cracks in Richard's empire widened, threatening to swallow him whole. Yet, amidst the turmoil, a glimmer of hope emerged, not just for me, but for everyone who had ever felt powerless against corruption. Sometimes, standing up for yourself isn't just an act of defiance, it's a declaration of resilience. And as the battle raged on, I knew one thing for certain, this fight was far from over. In the days that followed, the whirlwind surrounding Technova showed no signs of abating. News outlets picked up the story, sensationalizing every twist and turn as details leaked to the press. Headlines screamed about corporate espionage, stolen innovations, and the downfall of a once-respected CEO. Reporters camped outside the office building, shoving microphones into the faces of bewildered employees as they tried to make sense of the madness. Meanwhile, online forums buzzed with theories, memes, and debates, transforming what should have been a private dispute into a very public spectacle. For me, the scrutiny was both exhilarating and exhausting. On one hand, I relished the validation that came with having my side of the story heard. Friends, acquaintances, and even strangers reached out, praising my courage and commiserating about similar experiences they'd endured in toxic work environments. Messages flooded my inbox, each one reinforcing the belief that I'd done the right thing, not just for myself, but for others who might feel inspired to take a stand. On the other hand, the constant attention took its toll. Sleep eluded me as my mind raced with possibilities, replaying conversations and anticipating Richard's next move. Every knock at the door or ring of the phone sent my heart pounding, convinced it signaled another confrontation or revelation. I found solace in routine, clinging to the familiar rhythms of daily life to anchor myself amidst the chaos. Morning runs became meditative escapes, allowing me to clear my head and recharge before facing another day of uncertainty. Amidst the turmoil, unexpected opportunities began to emerge. Former colleagues contacted me, eager to collaborate on new ventures untethered from Technova's shadow. Venture capitalists intrigued by the drama reached out, expressing interest in funding future projects. Even competitors extended olive branches, recognizing the value of aligning with someone who had proven willing to fight for her creations. Each inquiry brought a mix of excitement and trepidation, forcing me to weigh risks against rewards and consider paths I'd never imagined exploring. Yet, despite the flurry of activity, my focus remained squarely on the unfolding drama at Technova. Legal proceedings dragged on, with lawyers poring over contracts, emails, and system logs in search of definitive proof. The board of directors wrestled with conflicting loyalties, torn between loyalty to Richard, who had steered the company through years of growth, and accountability for actions that threatened its very foundation. Meetings stretched late into the night, tempers flared, and alliances shifted like sand dunes in a storm. Through it all, I maintained a strategic distance, refusing to engage publicly beyond issuing a single statement affirming my commitment to ethical innovation. Privately, however, I continued monitoring Flowsync, tweaking the disruptions I'd introduced to keep Richard and his team perpetually off balance. Each glitch, each error message served as a reminder of my presence, a silent declaration that I wouldn't be silenced or sidelined. As weeks turned into months, the strain began to show. Richard's health deteriorated visibly, dark circles forming under his bloodshot eyes as stress gnawed away at him. Once confident strides faltered, replaced by hesitant steps as he navigated a landscape increasingly hostile to his ambitions. Allies distanced themselves, wary of association with a sinking ship, while enemies circled like vultures, waiting for the final blow. And then, just when it seemed the saga might drag on indefinitely, a breakthrough occurred. Hidden deep within the trove of documents I'd compiled, investigators uncovered a smoking gun, a draft contract between Richard and Apex Ventures outlining terms that explicitly excluded any mention of compensation or recognition for the original developer me. Coupled with irrefutable evidence of unauthorized data transfers and attempts to bypass security protocols, the discovery sealed Richard's fate. The announcement came swiftly, delivered via press release and internal memo alike. Richard had resigned effective immediately, citing personal reasons and stepping aside to allow Technova to heal and rebuild. Speculation swirled about settlements, lawsuits, and potential criminal charges, but none of that mattered to me anymore. What mattered was the precedent set, that creativity and integrity could triumph over greed and exploitation. In the aftermath, Technova underwent a transformation. New leadership emerged, committed to fostering transparency and collaboration rather than secrecy and competition. Policies changed, empowering developers to retain ownership of their work and ensuring fair compensation for contributions. Slowly but surely, trust began to rebuild, brick by painstaking brick. For me, the journey wasn't over. Challenges remained, scars lingered, and lessons learned would shape decisions yet to come. But as I stood on the precipice of a new chapter, gazing out at a horizon filled with possibilities, I knew one thing for certain: Sometimes, the greatest victories aren't measured in dollars or accolades, but in the courage to forge your own path, even when the odds seem insurmountable.